Again, by way of introductions, my name is Mark Sullivan. I work for your Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs. I serve as advisor to the Washington State Military Transition Council, which is a cooperative effort between state agencies, federal agencies, local government, military installations, public and for-profit and nonprofit organizations, all of who sort of share responsibility for supporting transitioning service members moving into civilian life, as well as military families, including military spouses who PCS here with their spouse and need to enter the local civilian labor force. A lot of the work that I do is focused around building partnerships between folks in different jurisdictions and different sectors. And so that's really what I'm going to talk a lot to you about today. I also have my own consulting practice around organizational development, leadership development, those kinds of things. One of the other things that hopefully I'll be able to do here for you today, and hopefully it would be valuable to you, is talk a little bit about what this means for your own careers. Where do you want to work in the government sector? Do you want to work in the private sector? Do you want to work in the nonprofit world? And hopefully this will inform some of those decisions for you as well. So, like I said, I like to do things more in sort of a seminar format. So I'm just going to start with a couple of questions. First of which is, how many of you think you're going to go into business, into for-profit? Yeah? Okay, good. How many of you think you might work in the nonprofit world? Might, okay. How many of you think you might work for the government at some point? Maybe. Okay. You'll find, actually, one of the things I found, I've worked in human resources in the government world for a while as well, and one of the things that I found is that it's not like it was 20, 30 years ago when I entered the labor force, where somebody goes to work for the government and they work for that same government entity or institution or agency for their entire careers. What we have now are a lot of folks who move between sectors. They may work for government for a couple of years and then go and work for a nonprofit, and then they may go work for business or for some philanthropical organization for a few years, and then they'll come back. And that's why I think it's really helpful for those who are interested in sort of public purpose work or public policy work, either from a business perspective or from a nonprofit perspective or a government perspective, knowing how these different pieces fit together, who does what best, can help both figure out how to do your work, but also figure out how you manage your career moving forward. Yeah. So let's start just by talking about a couple of the different sectors. And since most folks here expect to do some work in the private sector, what is it that the private sector does best?
Make money.
Make money?
I was thinking. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How do they make money?
Providing a service.
Providing a service, figuring out what that service is.
Jumping through hoops.
Jumping through hoops? Like what kind of hoops?
State, government, federal.
Okay, so navigating certainly the regulatory and environment, some of those kinds of things. What else?
Providing more competition based instead of necessarily nonprofits. They're not really trying to compete. They're just trying to go for greater purposes usually.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Yeah. So business is all about finding something common. It's finding your niche, creating something new, getting out to market, building a market, or invading somebody else's market space, trying to create something new to sell, produce, to provide to folks. What does business do bad? Or what is it not particularly good at?
Corporate responsibility.
Corporate responsibility, those kind of higher social purpose kinds of things. It's hard. When you are constantly thinking about the bottom line, it's that sort of greater social good kind of stuff is difficult to be able to allocate time and attention to. Yeah. What about government? What is government good at?
Oversight. Regulation.
Oversight, regulation.
A lot of paperwork.
A lot of paperwork.
Bureaucratics.
What's that?
Bureaucratics.
Bureaucratics. Why does it do all those things?
They
Set
just
standards.
What's that?
Set standards.
Set standards.
I would say protection also,
So protect.
legal confines, such like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the government does the things that can't fail. It's the stuff, the sort of the floor of things. We won't let people starve. We won't let other countries invade us. We make sure that if somebody is hurt, that emergency services will get to them quickly, efficiently. It's that kind of stuff that you're not going to rely completely on the market to provide. Yeah. What does government do badly? That shouldn't be too hard.
Red tape.
Red tape,
Yeah.
bureaucracy, slow. Okay.
Communication, sometimes communication is, to me, it's just like,
Yeah.
I didn't know that was a law, or,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, sometimes even just letting people know what the rules are, what the laws are. Yeah, yeah. What about the nonprofit world? What does the nonprofit world do best?
Oh, they give lots of hugs.
Yeah.
Lots of hugs, the feel good kind of stuff.
Yeah, feel good stuff. Man. Feel good stuff.
Let's delve into that just a little bit more.
So what you want more?
Yeah. What else? What does the nonprofit world do better than government or business?
Serve the people.
Serve the people?
Yeah, they're I mean, because my understanding is that the nonprofit world usually has two separate customer base, which is, you know, the population that they serve as well as who funds them. So I guess what they do best is serve those two separate customer base, but primarily the population that they serve. So
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I think it's oftentimes good to distinguish between, particularly in the nonprofit world, who your customer is and who pays you, because they are two different things, and they're stakeholders, they're key stakeholders that you need to be aware of, and you need to be able to accommodate. But they're sort of two different constituencies that are there. What is the nonprofit world bad at?
raising money.
Raising money. Yeah. Money's a big thing. They don't have the power to do anything. You are constantly in the nonprofit world. You're living kind of hand to mouth.
Sustainability and
So-
consistency.
Exactly.
For
Exactly.
that reason.
So I'm going to give you a model for public-private nonprofit cooperation. It's based on something called the Trilemma. It's a macroeconomic construct. The gist of it basically is that in the real world you have to make choices. And that in our world, in the world of public-private nonprofit partnerships, it's a matter of who are you going. There are certain things that if you live in one of those areas, the public nonprofit or the for-profit world, you're going to have sort of core competencies within your area, things that you do well, but you're going to need to figure out who you need to partner with to figure out to advance whatever it is the thing that you want to do. So this trilemma. I'm going to suggest this. The core competence of business is innovation. Okay. Business is really good at figuring out, let's try something new. If it works, we'll test it out. If it works, we'll scale it out. If it doesn't work, we'll pivot and do something different. We won't waste a whole lot of time trying to figure it out because bottom line, we've got to figure out how to make money, how to get market share, how to return value to our shareholders. The core competence of the nonprofit world, I'm going to say, is inspiration. Yeah, it's that finding that big thing, that idea that's of interest to the public or to whatever portion of the public that they serve, and trying to make change that will make the world better for that population. You can see that the core competence of government is sustainability. You could also say it's resilience. It's the stuff that can't fail. It's the social support system, the networks. It's making sure that people don't go hungry at night, that vulnerable children and adults are taken care of, that the roads have potholes that are fixed, that the economy works, that the public is protected, and that we're safe from enemies, foreign, domestic, etc. Okay? So, the challenge, I think, for us in our careers and for any of us who work in one of these sectors who want to make something big happen, who want to advance some public policy, because public policy is not just the province of government. Public policy is the province of both folks who work in the nonprofit world and of business, is what is the best way in order to make that happen? Understanding what your strengths are in your particular sector and who can you partner with in order to make that happen. Now, looking at, let's say that I'm working in business and looking at a core competence of innovation. What is it that we said that government isn't particularly good at? Or sorry, not government, that business isn't particularly good at.
So
Corporate social responsibility.
Social responsibility. It's those things that are basically purposeful. Yeah. When is it that a business might want to collaborate with government in order to advance a broader purpose beyond beyond profit and market share?
I don't know, if they get a tax incentive, they might do donations.
Yeah. So they may want to partner with government in order to create in a business environment that's more conducive to investment, growth, and prosperity. Anything else? When else might the government pursue to achieve some kind of change through a partnership with government?
Influence policy,
Policy, what kind of policy?
policies that allow them to do what they want.
All right, well, give me a couple of examples.
How about housing?
Yeah.
Housing.
Yeah.
So government or business is not, unless they're going to get a profit or return on it, isn't going to go out and build housing. Does business have an interest in housing?
Yep.
Yeah, you have to have a place for workers to be. They might be interested in public transportation. They may be interested in public safety. There's any number of things where the business is going to want to advance a broader social purpose because it's going to be conducive to the operations of their business. Yeah. One of the well, I'll get to that in a second. When might a business want to partner with a nonprofit organization?
When they have a CSR initiative that they're trying out.
Okay, so give me an example.
Like,
So CSR, by the way, for folks who know, is corporate social responsibility.
so, like for the Seahawks, I know that they do like the CSR thing, like with children, like keeping children like healthy and stuff like that. So it would just like basically trying to enact like fitness and wellness within like the community.
Okay, and why would that be of interest to business? Or to the Seahawks, for example?
Broaden like the audience, make sure that kids like have like an interest like in physical activity at like an early age, I guess, and be able to bring more viewers to the networks for watching the Seahawks or other football teams if they do it.
So it might be of interest to them just in terms of supporting their customer base, their viewer base. It may help with long-term I don't know, interest of viewership, those kinds of things.
And also like imagery too, like to get away from the fact of like football is just like smashing each other and this and that. It's also like about like staying healthy and being active.
Improving brand image for the industry.
Healthier customers can pay for longer.
There you go. There you go. There you go. We have a partnership right now with the Seahawks organization. It's the State Department of Veterans Affairs and a number of other state agencies around veterans employment. They're going to be hosting an event. They're going to be bringing in other employers, and we're basically going to be doing a career event in cooperation. So, but that's one of the things in which we've done with them with business. But you could have any number of nonprofit organizations, Hiring Our Heroes, and others that do very similar kinds of things. Hiring Our Heroes does an event with Safeco. And Safeco Field around doing similar kinds of things. So yeah, you might reach out to a nonprofit organization because nonprofits are really good at sort of figuring out what the public temperature is and engagement with particular communities. So
Also, I think part of the Seahawks is because they're a center of influence. Because now everybody knows the Seahawks, and now if the Seahawk is promoting it with, St. Jude Hospital, whatever, it has a lot more feeling, warm and fuzzy feeling as opposed to just a nonprofit saying, hey, give to St. Jude.
yeah.
Yeah.
So great,
Yeah.
brand image, brand presence. All those different kinds of things around the principles of branding that become really, really positive have a return for the business. You also will oftentimes find industry groups that will do this because there's an opportunity to advance something as an industry which may be too big of an investment for one individual employer, but collectively they're willing to do something in order to increase interest in athletics or in some other area of social good which benefits the industry. Yeah. Let's take another one. What is it that we talked a little bit about what the weaknesses are of the nonprofit world. When would they want to partner with government or business?
For funding.
Money. Okay. What else?
Furthering their goal.
Okay. What is it that government or business can do that they can't do on their own?
Create laws.
Create laws. Yeah. So we call this power. Oftentimes it's in terms of dollars or it's in terms of laws, different kinds of things that they can't do on their own. Yeah. The constant bane of life in the nonprofit world is that you are always resource and authority poor. That you're always, like say, living sort of hand to mouth in order to get what you want to get done. One of the major jobs in the nonprofit world is fundraising, development. You know, I serve on a board for my kids' school, and we're constantly going out and asking for folks to fund different kinds of educational initiatives. Because as a nonprofit organization, the school just doesn't have the resources to do these things on their own. When might a nonprofit organization want to go to business rather than government?
Innovation.
Innovation,
Money.
money. Oftentimes, like I say, you know, a lot of it comes down to dollars. Business tends to give short-term money rather than long-term money. So, you know, particularly if you're looking for, I want to do this campaign, a public outreach campaign around, I don't know, smoking cessation or getting getting kids more physically active or, you know, developing more tourism kinds of things in downtown Tacoma or Seattle. I mean, you might see those kinds of things saying, hey, we got this initiative for the next year. We need, you know, $120,000 in order to put it out. You know, these dozen companies can each kick in 10, 20 grand in order to make that happen. When might a nonprofit organization go to government for a partnership? Or try to partner with government to further one of their aims?
For the long-term funding, like long-term investments and stuff.
Maybe long-term funding, because the government does actually give money out to nonprofit organizations, or it'll contract certain services through nonprofits.
Like NASA.
What's that?
Like NASA.
Yeah, exactly. So what else might they go to government for?
The only thing I can think of is a public benefit.
Explain.
As an example, I don't know, child abuse, as an example. You know, there should be a law that you shouldn't punch your kid or whatever.
There you go. There you go. There ought to be a law. That's essentially it. There is the motto of a lot of nonprofit organizations, particularly that are social justice oriented or public benefit oriented, is that there ought to be a law. So, trafficking.
I don't know, child pornography, whatever it is.
Exactly. Or, you know, maybe it's you know, consumer protection groups will say, you know, banks and lending institutions shouldn't be allowed to do X, area near and dear to Tom's heart. So,
They should do anything they want to do.
yeah. But that's it, is that you will find public advocacy groups, nonprofit organizations that will say, you know, we don't have the power to make people do stuff, so let's use the institutional authority of government to make it, you know, make a law, to make it so that things can't happen or force individuals or force organizations to do something. So, you know, again, it's that use of power. What is it that government needs that it can't do for itself that it would need to partner with the nonprofit or the business world for?
And generate revenue.
Taxes.
I mean, all they do is
Services
tax.
as well. Yeah, because the government itself don't usually provide services. They'll have, you know, they'll give some money to like a nonprofit organization that's providing services in different sectors.
So contracts.
So particularly with like the nonprofit world, if there's like a public service, you'll see a lot of government services that are run through nonprofit organizations. There might be a nonprofit housing organization. In my world, a lot of veterans services are contracted out. King County has a huge veterans levy for for different services, and they contract out a lot of those services to different partner organizations. They actually, because King County has so much more money than a lot of places, including the state, they'll contract back to us as a state to deliver some services on their behalf. But yeah, oftentimes they will go to nonprofit organizations in order to deliver some of their services. Why would they want to go to the nonprofit organization rather than do it themselves?
Because some of their structure is specifically for that one purpose, and that funding can't be used for anything else.
Yeah. So yeah, they're focused on a particular service. Is there anything else that the nonprofit world is uniquely better at?
I think this stuff is the specialized, individualized services, possibly, because when they're focusing on one thing, then they could deliver those services more effectively.
Yeah, so it can be very highly specialized. I would also add this. The nonprofit world is really, really good at community engagement. That is what they do. They are there for, with, by the people. So you will see oftentimes government organizations that want to connect with particular communities saying, we need this nonprofit organization to help us make those connections because we're all the way in Washington, D.C. or down in Olympia or in the some city office or county building that doesn't they just don't have the resources to constantly maintain those connections.
Yeah, like similar to what you just said, I was just going to say they're better at marketing than the government, so they just utilize that source to get the word out.
They do. They have those channels, and it's one of those areas very similar to the way that business operates. Business doesn't always have the channels to particular communities, and so they will leverage that relationship because, again, community engagement, this sort of, what is the pulse of the community that the nonprofit world. In other parts of the world, they don't use the term nonprofit, they use civil society, but that's essentially it, civil society. But yeah, you'll see a lot of like the major sort of development organizations, they connect with civil society, which is basically the equivalent of nonprofit groups in those other parts of the world. But they have that way of connecting with the people who are the beneficiaries of a particular service, who have a particular interest in an area of public policy. Yeah. When is it that government would want to partner with business? That would address some kind of deficit that government has, that business could do better.
You said the government wouldn't want to go?
Where they would want to partner with business because business can do something better than them.
Innovate.
Innovate. Yeah, so I mean, a lot of times there are areas, it's that process of coming up with an idea, testing it, scaling it out if it works, pivoting if it doesn't. Yeah.
So like incidents for like solar engineering or new more efficient ways of producing electricity.
Exactly. There's a big government interest. It's a big priority of our government right now around alternative clean energy sources. Is there a government agency that can create new alternative energy sources? No, there may. I mean, from time to time we've had things like an energy office, but they don't actually do the invention. They don't actually create the innovation.
Yeah, so when 9/11 happened, I don't know if you guys know this, but the government went to Hollywood to figure out a new weapon system because they didn't realize that the Microsoft flight simulator was so realistic that that's how the terrorists learned how to fly.
Oh God.
And so they went there and said, why are they doing this? And basically, that was the first thing that came to my mind. It's like, wow. So they understand that what they're not good at, but they go to the Hollywood where they're always innovating new ideas and products, right? Mm-hmm. And things that you see on TV or movies are like, wow, that's a cool weapon system. Never thought about that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So here's I completely lost my thought. I think it's a good point that essentially. Well, let me actually give you another example. A number of years ago, I helped create a new state agency called. It was the Department of Early Learning. It's recently been changed now to the Department of Youth and Family Services. But it was basically an organization that focused on early learning for children, sort of the K through 5 age group, sort of or like a 0 through 5 age group before folks get into the K through 12 system. part of that, the creation of that agency was also the creation of a nonprofit organization called Thrive by Five. It was co-chaired by, at that time, Governor Gregoire and Bill Gates Sr. But the idea was that there was going to be this private organization out there that could do basic research on early childhood development and all the things that contribute to early childhood development, the kinds of things that really government was not going to be able to do well. They weren't going to be able to do the basic research well. They weren't sort of on top of the pulse of innovation within this area of public policy. But there was a whole part of civil society out there of folks who were thinking about stuff and trying out new things and doing basic research, and a lot of philanthropic dollars that were out there that could support this. The idea was that here was an opportunity to have a government institution which would essentially create the regulatory infrastructure of early childhood development that partnered with a nonprofit organization and that had some for-profit sponsors that could work on some of that sort of basic stuff, the innovation kind of stuff. The thing that I would emphasize here is that what the nonprofit world and the business world that government really just doesn't do particularly well is act in an agile fashion. Like I say, it's that ability to try out something, and if it doesn't work, do something different, or scale it out if it does work. And depending upon what it is that you need to do, you're going to partner with business, who is good at sort of testing out and doing these kinds of things. You're going to work with the nonprofit world, which is really good at civic engagement and sort of getting in contact with different populations.
Hopefully this question will not go off track, but it almost seems like a lot of things that comes to the table, there's always money behind it, like Bill Gates and Gregoire and Sullivan. What about the common folks that want something passed or initiative? It doesn't seem like the common folks can move that needle to the next level.
It's difficult, and I think you're looking at a fundamental challenge, really, of the world of civil society, of the nonprofit world. Now, a lot of things where the needle moves quickly are areas where there are big philanthropic dollars, and that's why a lot of nonprofit organizations rely either on government sponsorship, big government dollars, or on big business dollars through whatever philanthropy or corporate social responsibility initiative out there. It still happens, though, that you have small grassroots organizations that can make big things happen. We've seen a range of different sort of social responsibility movements that have gotten traction, that have, particularly when it comes to public policy, have managed to get laws passed despite perhaps even opposition from big moneyed interests. Thomas, you and I were talking earlier about the passage of Washington's recent gun restriction laws. That was not a well-funded corporate sponsored activity. I think similarly, when on the federal level, a lot of the Dodd-Frank kinds of laws around banking and lending regulation, the creation of the what's the credit regulating, the small credit regulating organization that's gotten a lot of media attention. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Consumer Finance. Yes, it's CFRB or something like that. Again, didn't have a lot of moneyed interest, but it had a lot of sort of populist sort of backing and support. Now, that doesn't mean that you necessarily get the public policy result that you want when that happens. And oftentimes I think where really successful nonprofit organizations is that they pivot back and forth between different kinds of partnerships. I think a nonprofit organization doesn't necessarily have to work exclusively with government or exclusively with business. I think the ones that are more effective and have longevity are the ones that pivot back and forth and develop relationships with both, but figure out where's the opportunity to capitalize on that relationship and sequence the kinds of public policy initiatives that they want to work on. Similarly for government, there are times when government will work more effectively with business and times when it'll work more effectively with civil society. Oftentimes, government will work more robustly with business on public infrastructure kinds of things. It's like, we need more houses, we need more roads, we need more economic development kinds of things. They'll work more effectively and more robustly with the nonprofit world when they have to do things that are oriented around more civic engagement and more sort of getting public backing behind particular policy. Similarly, like I said, we'll have business that'll pivot back and forth depending upon what the issue may be. Now let me sort of pivot to another question. I asked you at the beginning here, how many of you expect to work in business, in the nonprofit world, in the government world. Can somebody who, say, your personal sort of set of competencies of interests, your personal values are more around innovation, can that person work effectively and be satisfied in government or in the nonprofit world? You think so? Are they going to have any challenges or problems?
Probably will.
Mm-hmm. I've known a number of folks who have, because they've had a personal interest in sort of greater social purpose kinds of things, have come out of the business world and gone to work for government. They have brought a lot to government in the world in the stuff that they've done, but there's been a little bit of frustration, because the primary orientation of government is sustainability, there's always that sort of pushback against the kind of let's try something out and see what happens kind of ethic. That doesn't mean that there aren't innovative people in government. There are plenty of innovative people in government. There's also plenty of inspired people in government. But you'll find that you're pushing up against sort of the institutional set of values. Similarly, you can find, I've known a number of folks who have moved, out of government and gone to work for the for-profit world. At some point, they may not be as satisfied with sort of that greater social purpose work. A lot of them end up doing different kinds of philanthropical or corporate social responsibility kinds of things, just because they find that niche that sort of satisfies that inner need or purpose. But I think that's also where you find that a lot of folks end up moving between different sectors in terms of their careers now. That somebody will work in banking for several years and then go to work for a higher ed institution, or they may spend a number of years as a active duty service member, essentially being a government employee in the U.S. Army or one of the other armed forces for several years, and say, okay, I'm done with that now. I'm ready to go try out my innovation muscles and go work in business, or try and go work out my inspiration muscles and go and work for a nonprofit for a number of years and see what happens. And people will move a lot back and forth and in between. So I think just in terms of your own careers, you have some flexibility. What I would suggest is that just be aware of the environment that you're going into, what your personal values and attributes are, and figure out what do I want to do right now, understanding that you have some flexibility over the lifetime of your career. So that's sort of the main talking points that I have for you. At this point, I'd just kind of like to open it up to discussion and say, what do you think? What does this mean in terms of your own career planning and what you'd like to do?
I have a question. I've heard that there's a new form of organizations that's between nonprofit and for-profit, and they get the incentives of being nonprofit, but at the same time, they're not restricted. Is that...
There are some organizations, I think they're still fundamentally nonprofit, because the purpose of the organization is essentially to advance some social good, whatever the sense of what that social good is from the vantage point of that organization. You'll see a number of nonprofit organizations that are revenue generating in some fashion. There's an organization my dad was on the board of for several years, and he came out of finance, private investment world, called Lighthouse for the Blind. Essentially provides opportunities for folks who are blind or visually impaired to work in an industrial setting, and they get a lot of government contracts and government contractor contracts, working for Boeing, working with in advanced manufacturing, using some adaptive equipment to do some things, and they basically get paid for the work that they do. And so that provides a revenue stream. I wouldn't necessarily call it for profit, because the ultimate purpose of the organization isn't to generate market share or profits or shareholder value, but it uses some of those principles, and it bridges the gap between those worlds. You also have some government organizations that generate revenue as well. But they still, it's not, you've got correctional industries, which basically puts folks who are incarcerated to work learning job skills, but also generating some revenue that goes back and pays for the program. So there's some of these kind of bridge efforts, but the organization is still fundamentally a nonprofit or a government organization. Yeah.
I got a couple questions. First questions I have is, we talked about sustainability of government, and they're not innovative in a sense, but we have businesses that are innovative and nonprofits are and they inspire. I'm always perplexed in regards to every winter, there's certain regions that flood. And as you all know, insurance companies do not insure properties that are in the flood zone. You have to go to a government agency to buy flood insurance. But to me, that is such a losing proposition, because we know it floods and government continues to insure it. Why? How does the government realize, hey, this is not a winning proposition, and say we shouldn't do this anymore? We should ask the people, maybe move to higher ground and not get flooded. So I'm kind of, why do they allow that?
Why does government do that?
Yeah, I just don't get it.
So, I would suggest this. I would suggest that it's not government that is doing that, that it is actually civil society, that we have individuals and groups in these communities who have sort of a long cultural tradition of farming on floodplains, or the rural lifestyle in the community that they want to preserve and protect. And at some point, the sort of civic engagement within that community got people to organize and get together and put together a law. Now, the challenge with government, if you create a government program, that program will never go away. That's the sort of, it sort of fits the basic ethic of government. Government is about sustainability. It's about preserving, and protecting and defending and keeping things stable, because that's what the people generally expect of government, is to not let certain things fail. And so, once it's been institutionalized, it will be preserved and protected and defended for as long as that's where the status quo is. Now, the balance of that is that if somebody feels that this is a waste of public resources and that we ought to be using the resources in a different way, the impetus for that is probably not going to come from government. The impetus for that is probably going to come from other civic engagement, nonprofit, or sort of that civil society world that says, no, we need to change the way that things operate because it's just too dangerous for people to live in these hazardous places. Or from business that says, that there is something here that makes this unsustainable in terms of the economic viability of the region in which we want to do business.
My next question is, as far as takeaways, most of us here at this table are, they're business majors and they're interested in entrepreneurship and their capitalism, for good or whatever they want to do it for. But in regards to takeaway, how can a private sector, what can you give them from if you're in the private sector, and how to communicate, maneuver within the government world?
So I think the first thing is just to understand what is the core function of government. And I think a lot of people see government and really sort of the nonprofit world as the same thing. It's everything other than business. But understanding that the purpose of government, the core value and ethic of government, and a lot of the people who operate within government are about sustainability. Because oftentimes in government, you don't get rewarded for successes. You tend to get more punished for failure more than rewarded for successes. And that's because the core function is to preserve, protect, and defend, to ensure that safety net is there. And that if you are negotiating with and trying to collaborate with government to advance an interest of your business or of an industry group or of the business community, begin by understanding that, but also then understand how to advocate for what it is that you bring to the table. So, if you simply want to advance, a public purpose, say here is, what is good in terms of the economic viability of our region, of our area, that will help sustain and create jobs and those things that are important to the state. And then also, if you want to be able to participate and actually be a collaborator, being a partner, is figuring out how to advocate for, okay, I understand the government, you can't do this, but here's something that we can bring to the table. In the same way that Bill Gates Sr. said, hey, government, great, create a new regulatory infrastructure for early childhood education, but let me bring people, resources, and business to the table in terms of basic research and exploration of different ways in which to really grow and develop youth in order to build healthy, vibrant communities, et cetera. Do that. Or if there are any number of things in terms of, okay, well, maybe there's a different way in which to finance public infrastructure, or maybe there's another way to look at public transportation other than building more rails and trains and roads. There's a lot of things that I think business is more forward looking at, because you're always anticipating where the new markets are going to be. So there's been a lot of talk about different kinds of work-life arrangements. Do people actually have to go into an office building now? Or can they work from home? The next time that there is a public investment project in new government space in office buildings, maybe advocating for, maybe there are other ways in which, there's a whole sector now in real estate around hoteling space. Maybe government could actually take more advantage of that, and there's an opportunity for public-private partnerships around alternative kinds of workspace for government workers, rather than doing the big government investment. In government, we tend to do a lot of the 3-year, $30 million project kind of thing, only to realize that 2 years in, we've gone too far, and actually the assumptions that we had at the beginning were wrong. How do we? There's no ability to pivot. There's an opportunity, I think, in the public-private partnership arena, particularly between business and government, to say, well, what about financing, 10, 3 months, $30,000 projects, and seeing how this works. And again, that's what business brings to the table that government isn't necessarily oriented to capitalize upon. You're getting kind of my stream of consciousness here, but I think these are some of the ways in which,
It does make sense, because sometimes in business, we always talk about beta testing it. Because test it out. If it doesn't work, just change it. What test, like last week we talked about proof of concept, we can read about it, we can do paralysis analysis, but if you don't take it to market, you're going to be talking about it all day long. But if it doesn't work, we can always pull it back. I guess it's a segue to my next question. So in business, there's one person that makes the decision, yes or no. I'm trying to figure out who in government is the final decision maker and says, yeah, we're going to go do that. I mean, it seems like there's committees every time.
I think there are, and I think it's probably because the authorizing environment for government is different than the authorizing environment for business. Fundamentally because business is about profit and market share and shareholder value, that you have the options to say whatever is going to address sort of those three factors, we will make decisions and we will stop doing something. If you are Nordstrom, you can try the Nordstrom rack for a few years and then realize that that's not a profitable market segment and pivot to doing something else. Or you might pivot to online sales, or you might do those kinds of things. When you are in government, it's probably a more complex authorizing environment, because there's lots of stakeholders invested in every single program or every single market segment that you are invested in, and you are probably invested in every single market segment that is there. So I think that's why we default to committees, or we default to advisory councils and those different kinds of things, because we have many different many different folks to go to in which to be authorized. I think for business's sake, the important thing is to be at that table, which means that folks like Tom end up spending a lot of time on committees that they otherwise wouldn't invest time and resources into. But it gives the opportunity to be part of that discussion with the consumer advocacy groups and the community groups and the city and local advocacy organizations that all have a stake in not losing something. I think oftentimes there's a truism about systems, and this is particularly true of government systems, that all systems are self-replicating. Otherwise, they wouldn't be systems. They'd just be a point in time that something happened. And that because of that, and one of the ways in which they are self-replicating is that it's not that people resist change, it's that they resist loss. And when you have so many stakeholders that are invested in a particular area of public policy, there's always somebody who has something to lose. And so, understanding, what people have to lose across that system gives you a tactical, if not strategic, advantage in understanding how to influence the public policy decisions. Keeping in mind that, again, it's not actually government that's doing this. This is all the different folks in civil society who are saying, I want this, and I want this, and I want this, and I want this. Government oftentimes is driven by a need or a desire, or a sort of a core value of being responsive to all those things. Right. And so if you want to be part of that discussion, you have to be at the table.
Right. And that's what we talked about a few weeks back about language in the business world, where there's government, nonprofit, we have to understand that language. And, I take full responsibility for this because I tend to stay away from government because they piss me off. And it doesn't seem like, they listen. It's just like, oh my God, I'm just trying to make money. And here's another rule. Then I respect Mark in the sense that he, comes in here on his free time to educate us on this. But having this session allow me to fully understand that government, I didn't realize it was about sustainability and preserve. I didn't, because I had a blind eye and said, you know what? Evil.
They stopped me from doing what I wanted.
Yeah, exactly. But now, okay, I get it.
I want to test one of my assumptions with this question, as far as say like if a nonprofit wanted to partner with, government to receive funding, like by way of grants or whatever have you. My understanding, or my assumption, I should say, was that the government pretty much sets out these parameters, obviously. And if the nonprofit falls within those parameters, then this, should I say, a quote-unquote pass-fail basis. If you pass, yeah, we'll give you this money. If you fail or stop meeting this criteria, then we take the money away. Is that a true assumption to be made?
I think it is true. So, again, this sort of goes back to, one of the constituencies of government, and again, this is sort of a civil society kind of thing. In a lot of parts, in a lot of America, and particularly in Washington State, we have very strict ethics laws, and there's a high degree of accountability. It's one of the reasons why we also have really transparent public disclosure laws. You can look in and get information on almost anything in government. So there's a high interest, and it's built into sort of the culture of government, that whatever we do is transparent, it's reviewable, and is held to high standards of credibility. It also means that we're not very flexible, because you don't want to fail at the ethics and transparency thing, because bad things happen to you in government if that happens. It's everything gets blasted across media if there's an ethical failure in government. What that means then, that if there is a nonprofit organization that wants to secure government funds in order to advance a social purpose, is that they're going to have to go through a really strict and oftentimes Byzantine process to apply for and secure those funds. It's also one of the reasons that a lot of nonprofits, when they're going for money, they won't go to the government. They go to the private sector, because the private sector tends to be, try it out, see what happens, and if it doesn't work, try something else. If you're going to secure money from the government, we're going to expect that you're going to be in this for the long haul, that you're going to do it for a long time, and that you're going to do your work in a way that meets with the ethical and accountability constraints of government. Oftentimes the organizations that actually get government funds are other government entities. The State Department of Veterans Affairs will apply for funds from the federal government. The cities and counties will apply for funds from the state. And then there's a handful of, probably larger, more robust nonprofit organizations, longer term, that have existed for a while, that will also sort of get into that space because they've learned the process of doing it. Actually, my father, who was an investment portfolio manager for all of his career, his firm considered applying to be one of the firms that manages funds for the state pension fund. They decided not to do that because all of the rules and regulations and processes that they would need to go through in order to be approved to manage state pension funds were just too costly, too expensive to do that. So a lot of nonprofit and even business organizations will steer away from doing work with the government because they just don't have the back office infrastructure to manage those kinds of costs.
So I guess I like you now, Mike.
I liked you before, Tom.
I understand you now.
Yeah. Like I say, I think one of the things, and don't be surprised with the course of your post-baccalaureate career, that you end up actually working in a number of different sectors. And like I say, I don't want to steer people away from the government. I consider myself, having more of sort of an innovation mindset that has worked for me and not worked for me at different times in my career with government. And the government needs that. But I think probably the more important thing is to be aware of it enough so that you know where the opportunities for collaboration are. Because I think a good public policy is really a matter of figuring out how to get these sectors to collaborate effectively with each other. So, you can do public policy work and not work for government. You can do it from the nonprofit world, you can do it from the business world. And you may want to even dabble in your careers moving back and forth between these so that you understand the internal dynamics of how each of these sectors work.
I'm glad you kind of said that because it just occurred to me that you guys understand what the SBA is, Small Business Administration. That's a government agency, federal government agency. And they provide access to quality capital to help small business grow or start. And so the SBA is similar to your student loans, Sallie Mae and all that. Sallie Mae doesn't lend you the money, they guarantee that the money will be paid back. And that's in essence what the SBA is all about. To add what Mark is saying is that if you have a really strong understanding how to maneuver through the system, you can be valuable to both sectors. As an example, I hate talking about myself, but I'm going to do it. I became very valuable in the banking community because I understood how to maneuver through the SBA system. And what that means is that when I worked for a bank, I understood everything about the bureaucracy and the paperwork and how to get what is called a POP status. It stands for Preferred Lending Program Provider, meaning that the SBA will give you the power of the pen to make credit decisions on the government's behalf. So what that means to the bank is that they don't have to go through this lengthy process of getting SBA documents. They just have to go through maybe 2 or 3 processes, and you can access the money, and you can do a lot of these SBA loans. And what you do is you securitize it and you sell it on the secondary market for a premium. And it gets bigger and bigger if you have real estate attached. So people found out that I was doing this, and they would court me and say, hey, you want to do this over here? You move bank to bank, and every time you move, you get a big raise. You're not talking about $5,000 or $10,000. You're talking about $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 raises and stock options. So if you can maneuver private, nonprofit, and public, you can become very, very valuable. So I agree with Mark. Let's just dabble in it and see. You don't have to stay forever. Just dabble in it and see what works for you. And you can still be an entrepreneur because you can start your own business or consult, right, for that. So.
And you'll find within both nonprofit and government organizations, what do they call it? Intrapreneurs.
Yes.
Folks who can take some of the principles of entrepreneurship and disruptive innovation and all that kind of stuff, and they're doing cool and exciting things. And again, that makes it makes government more informed and more agile in working with its partners as well. We've taken there's a certain segment of innovation that's really about sort of generating efficiency. It's either known as a Toyota production system or lean management, which is all about eliminating waste. And we've integrated a lot of things based on partnerships with organizations like Boeing and a lot of our medical institutions, taking some of these lean management techniques and applying them to government to reduce the time that it takes for government to do stuff. And that's basically just with a group of entrepreneurs throughout government who have adapted some of these private sector strategies for increasing efficiency and generating pockets of innovation within institutions. So there's a lot of ways in which to, like say, be innovative or be inspired or have a value of sustainability and work across these different organizations. Understanding that you don't have to spend all your time in your entire career in one sector. You had a question back here a bit ago.
Because it takes so long to do things, because you're having to go through different committees and all that kind of stuff. Does that mean that you guys just have a bunch of projects, like 30 of them at the same time going, or do you guys just focus on one at a time, and just try to get that one project through faster?
I think we're transitioning. So, I think the history of government, and you're talking about the government sector, I believe. So, like I say, as I mentioned ago, the history, this is our history with IT projects. You take the $30 million or sometimes $300 million, 3-year or 6-year project, and put all of your, what's the eggs in one basket? There we go. And say, this is what we're going to do. The challenge, particularly when you're trying to create something new, where you have an assumption about which way the world spins, but you may not be correct, is that you get 2 or 3 or 4 years into that project and realize that that sort of oh crap moment, that this isn't going to work and we need to do something different because either the assumption was wrong or the environment in which we do our business has changed. Investment in technology projects and cloud computing was one of those issues for the state, where we built lots of infrastructure around mainframe kinds of systems, and then we were institutionally committed to these things rather than utilizing the new technology. The ethic in business is to do the opposite. We will give you some seed money. We'll give you 30 grand or $3 million to do something for 3 months or a year. Try it out. And if it doesn't work, we'll cut our losses. But that's okay because we did 10 of those projects at a time and we learned in the process. Now, a space in between there is, for those of you who work in the IT space, are different agile product development cycles and processes, those kinds of things, which sort of generate learning during the process so that you can pivot during the course of a major project. But again, I think that's where government has benefited by the infusion of private and nonprofit sector talent into our decision-making processes. So that's sort of a non-answer to your question in terms of which way do we actually do it. I think that we're transitioning, that we've adapted some more sort of private sector-oriented innovation and product development models for doing different kinds of things. But it has gone against the grain of sort of what the history of government as an institution has operated.
Any more questions, guys? I hope that was informative, because if it's informative for me, I don't know why it's so interesting to me. It's just it's just trying to work together, and especially when you guys start your own business, you're gonna have to learn how to collaborate and, swallow your pride a little bit.
Yeah, when you go to apply for for your local business permits or real estate permits to be able to operate, to open up your own little manufacturing operation, a restaurant or whatever it might be, or you have to figure out the tax structure, or you have to apply for that SBA loan. Knowing how those systems work and what sort of the ethic and the mindset of the people behind it are, and how those institutions have been created, will give you a leg up on your competition.
Exactly. So, well, thank you, sir. That was fun.
Thank you.
Yeah.